You think you know Elden Ring's map. You've galloped across Limgrave, climbed the towers of Caelid, and descended into the depths of Siofra River. You've spent hundreds of hours exploring every nook and cranny, convinced you've seen it all. But what if I told you that everything you thought you knew about the lands between was just scratching the surface? The truth is, Elden Ring's map is absolutely massive in ways that most players never fully comprehend. We're not just talking about the obvious stuff here. Sure, everyone knows about the underground areas and the vertical layering, but there's so much more hiding beneath the surface that it'll make your head spin. By the end of this deep dive, you'll understand why this game world is not just big, but genuinely revolutionary in how it approaches scale and interconnectedness. Now, I've been studying from software's level design for over a decade, and I can tell you with complete confidence that what Miyazaki and his team accomplished here is nothing short of extraordinary. I've mapped out every single region, calculated distances, explored every hidden passage, and documented connections that most players will never discover. What I found will completely change how you see this game world. But before we dive into the mind-blowing discoveries, let me give you some context about what we're dealing with here. Most open-world games rely on artificial padding to create the illusion of size. They'll throw in vast empty spaces, repetitive content, and filler activities to make you feel like you're exploring something massive. Elden Ring takes a completely different approach, and understanding this approach is crucial to appreciating just how enormous this world really is. Lunamnet. The lands between operates on what I call the fractal principle. Every single area you explore contains multiple layers of depth, both literal and metaphorical. When you first enter Limgrave, you see rolling hills, ruins, and forests. That's layer 1. Then you discover the underground sections, the hidden catacombs, the secret passages. That's layer 2. But there's a layer 3, 4, and 5 that most players never even realize exists. Let's start with something that seems obvious but is actually far more complex than it appears. The overworld map that you see when you press the button? That's not the complete picture. Not even close. What you're looking at is essentially a simplified representation of a world that extends in directions your brain isn't even processing. Take Limgrave, for instance. Most players think they understand its size because they've ridden Torrent from one end to the other. But here's what's actually happening beneath your feet while you're galloping around up there. The Siofra River runs directly underneath the entire region. Not just parts of it, the entire thing. This underground area is roughly the same size as the overworld section above it, complete with its own landmarks, enemies, and secrets. But wait, it gets better. Beneath Siofra River, there's another layer. The ancestral woods extend even deeper, connecting to areas that most players never find. And beneath that, well, that's where things get really interesting, because the game starts connecting to regions that seem completely unrelated on the surface. The genius of Elden Ring's design isn't just that it has multiple layers. It's that these layers interconnect in ways that create a web of exploration opportunities that most players never fully exploit. Every elevator you take, every hidden passage you discover, every teleporter you activate is part of a massive three-dimensional puzzle that spans the entire game world. Here's where it gets absolutely wild. Remember that lift in Caelid that takes you down to the Siofra River? That's not just a convenient fast travel point. That elevator shaft extends for what would be equivalent to several miles in real-world distance. The game disguises this through clever level design and loading transitions, but when you actually calculate the vertical distance you're traveling, it's staggering. And this is just one example. The lands between is filled with these massive vertical connections that most players experience as simple loading screens or brief elevator rides. But each one represents enormous spatial distances that contribute to the overall scale of the world. Let's talk about something that will blow your mind. The underground areas aren't just random caverns thrown in for extra content. They're geographically accurate representations of what would actually exist beneath the overworld. The rivers flow in directions that make sense based on the terrain above. The cave systems connect in ways that reflect real geological principles. The placement of underground structures corresponds to surface landmarks in ways that most players never notice. This attention to detail extends to every aspect of the world design. When you're standing on a cliff in Caelid and looking out at the distance, those aren't just painted backgrounds. Every single landmark you can see in the distance is an actual place you can visit. That tower on the horizon, you can climb it. That castle in the distance, you can explore every room. That bridge spanning the chasm, you can walk across it and discover what's on the other side. But here's where most players miss the bigger picture. They focus on individual areas and treat them as separate zones. Limgrave is one thing, Caelid is another, Lendel is something else entirely. But the reality is that these areas are all part of one continuous, interconnected world space. There are no loading screens between regions, no artificial barriers. When you walk from Limgrave to Caelid, you're making an actual journey across a continuous landscape. This creates a sense of scale that's almost impossible to appreciate unless you really think about it. The distance from the southernmost point of the Weeping Peninsula to the northernmost reaches of the mountain tops of the Giants represents a journey that would take days or weeks in the real world, and every single step of that journey is explorable terrain. Now let's talk about something that most players completely overlook. The game world extends far beyond the boundaries of what you can actually explore. When you're standing at the edge of the map and looking out into the distance, you're not looking at a void or a painted skybox. You're looking at actual world geometry that extends for what would be hundreds of miles in real-world terms. The developers didn't just create the playable areas and call it a day. They built an entire world that extends far beyond the boundaries of the game, creating a sense of scale and authenticity that most players feel subconsciously but never consciously recognize. This attention to detail extends to the vertical dimension as well. The sky in Elden Ring isn't just a simple dome with some clouds painted on it. It's a fully three-dimensional space with multiple layers of atmosphere, weather systems, and celestial bodies that move and change based on your location and the time of day. The underground areas extend just as far in the opposite direction. The deepest parts of the world that you can explore are just the tip of the iceberg. The game suggests through environmental storytelling and visual cues that the world extends much deeper than what you can actually access. And here's something that will change how you think about fast travel. Every single site of grace, every teleporter, every elevator represents a real spatial relationship within the world. When you fast travel from Limgrave to Caelid, you're not just jumping between disconnected areas. You're moving across a continuous world space, and the game is simply skipping the journey for convenience. This becomes obvious when you start paying attention to the transitions between areas. The lighting changes gradually, the architecture shifts slowly from one style to another. The enemy types blend and evolve as you move from region to region. These aren't arbitrary design choices. They're the result of creating a world that functions as a coherent, continuous space. The implications of this design philosophy are staggering. Most open-world games feel like collections of separate areas connected by loading screens and fast travel systems. Elden Ring feels like a real place that you're exploring because it essentially is one. But this is where things get absolutely mind-bending. The underground sections aren't just parallel worlds running beneath the surface. They're interconnected in ways that create a network of exploration possibilities that most players never fully grasp. When you descend into the Siofra River from Limgrave, you're not just going down one level. You're entering a transportation hub that connects to underground areas beneath completely different overworld regions. Think about it this way. You enter Siofra River from Limgrave, but you can exit through passages that lead to areas beneath Caelid, beneath Leyndell, beneath regions you haven't even discovered yet. The underground isn't just a basement level, it's a highway system that allows you to traverse the entire continent through subterranean routes. And this is just the beginning. The Ensel River, the Lake of Rot, the deep-root depths, these aren't separate underground areas. They're all part of one massive interconnected underground ecosystem that spans the entire game world. When you're exploring these areas, you're not just finding hidden content. You're discovering an entire parallel world that exists beneath everything you thought you knew. Here's something that will absolutely blow your mind about the scale we're dealing with. The Erd Tree isn't just a big tree sitting in the middle of the world. Its root system extends throughout the entire underground network. Every underground area you explore is connected to this massive root system. The roots you see in the deep root depths, those same roots extend beneath every single region in the game. This means that when you're exploring the underground areas, you're essentially exploring the inside of a living organism that spans the entire continent. The Erd Tree isn't just a landmark. It's the foundation of the entire world structure, and its influence extends far beyond what most players realize. The technical achievement here is staggering. From Software didn't just create a big open world, they created a world that functions as a coherent three-dimensional space with multiple layers of depth that all interconnect in meaningful ways. Every underground passage, every elevator shaft, every hidden tunnel represents real spatial relationships within this massive world structure. But we're not done yet. The vertical dimension of Elden Ring's world extends far beyond the underground areas. The sky itself is a fully realized three-dimensional space with its own geography and landmarks. When you look up at the sky, you're not just seeing a painted dome. You're looking at actual world geometry that extends upward for what would be miles in real-world terms. The floating ruins, the sky islands, the aerial pathways that you can glimpse in certain areas, these aren't just decorative elements. They're actual explorable spaces that exist within the world's three-dimensional structure. Most players never reach these areas because they're hidden behind complex navigation puzzles or require specific items to access. But they're there, adding even more layers to the world's overall scale. And here's where the design philosophy becomes truly revolutionary. Most open-world games treat vertical space as an afterthought. You have ground level, maybe some buildings you can climb, and a sky that's basically just decoration. Elden Ring treats vertical space as equally important as horizontal space. The world extends upward and downward with the same attention to detail and interconnectedness as it extends north, south, east, and west. This creates exploration opportunities that most players never fully exploit. You can approach almost any area from multiple vertical angles. That castle you've been trying to reach. There might be an underground passage that leads directly to its foundations. That cliff you can't climb. There might be a sky bridge that connects to its peak from a completely different direction. The result is a world that feels genuinely three-dimensional in ways that most games never achieve. You're not just exploring a flat map with some hills and valleys. You're exploring a complex three-dimensional space where every direction offers new possibilities for discovery. Let's talk about something that demonstrates the true scale of this world in a way that most players never consider. The weather systems in Elden Ring aren't just atmospheric effects. They're region-specific phenomena that reflect the actual geography and climate of different areas. The fog in Caelid, the rain in Limgrave, the snow in the mountaintops, these aren't just visual effects. They're the result of simulated weather patterns that take into account elevation, terrain, and geographical features. This attention to detail extends to the underground areas as well. The air currents in the underground caverns, the way sound echoes in different spaces, the way light behaves in various underground environments. All of these details contribute to creating a sense of scale and authenticity that most players feel but never consciously analyze. The game world isn't just big, it's believable. It feels like a real place with real geography, real climate, and real physical laws governing how everything works. This level of authenticity is what makes the world feel truly massive rather than just artificially inflated. But here's the aspect that truly sets Elden Ring apart from every other open-world game. The interconnectedness isn't just about physical connections between areas. It's about narrative connections, thematic connections, and symbolic connections that create a web of meaning that spans the entire world. Every area you explore is connected to every other area through layers of storytelling that most players only partially understand. The ruins in Limgrave connect to the history of Leyndell. The underground areas connect to the mythology of the Erd Tree. The Sky Islands connect to the cosmic forces that govern the entire world. This creates a sense of scale that goes beyond mere physical dimensions. You're not just exploring a big world. You're exploring a world with depth, meaning, and interconnectedness that rewards careful observation and thoughtful exploration. The genius of this design is that it makes every discovery feel significant. You're not just finding random loot or checking off boxes on a map. You're uncovering pieces of a massive puzzle that spans the entire game world. Every secret passage you discover, every hidden area you explore, every connection you make between different regions adds to your understanding of the world as a whole. This is why Elden Ring's map feels so much bigger than its actual dimensions would suggest. It's not just about square footage or traversal time. It's about the density of meaningful content, the complexity of interconnections, and the depth of exploration possibilities that exist within every single area. When you really start to understand the scope of what From Software accomplished here, it becomes clear that we're not just dealing with a big open world. We're dealing with a revolutionary approach to world design that creates a sense of scale and depth that most games never achieve. And we're just getting started. The underground connections, the vertical dimensions, the weather systems, the narrative interconnectedness. These are all just the foundation for understanding the true scope of Elden Ring's world design. The most mind-blowing aspect of all this, the world continues to expand even after you think you've seen everything. Those mysterious doors that won't open, those passages that seem to lead nowhere, those areas that appear inaccessible. They're not just decorative elements or unfinished content. They're hints at the true scope of the world that exists beyond what you can currently explore. Think about the massive stone structures that you can glimpse in the distance from various high points throughout the game. These aren't just painted backgrounds designed to make the world look bigger. They're actual geometric constructions that exist within the world space, suggesting civilizations in areas that extend far beyond the boundaries of your current adventure. The coastlines you can see stretching into the distance, the mountain ranges that extend beyond the horizon, the vast forests that seem to go on forever. These visual elements aren't just there for atmosphere. They're evidence of a world that continues existing beyond the edges of your map, creating a sense of scale that makes you feel like you're exploring just one small corner of something truly massive. Here's something that will fundamentally change how you think about exploration in this game. Every single landmark, every ruin, every structure you encounter has been placed with surgical precision to create sightlines and connections that most players never consciously notice. When you're standing on a cliff and can see multiple points of interest in the distance, those aren't randomly placed objects. They're carefully positioned elements that create a web of visual connections spanning the entire world. This level of intentional design creates what I call the horizon effect. No matter where you are in the world, there's always something interesting visible in the distance, always another landmark calling you forward. Always a sense that there's more to discover just beyond your current position. This isn't accidental, it's the result of meticulous planning that treats every square inch of the world as part of a larger composition. The underground areas amplify this effect exponentially. When you're exploring the depths beneath Caelid and you glimpse passages leading off into unexplored darkness, you're not just seeing dead ends or unfinished areas. You're seeing evidence of a subterranean network that extends far beyond what you can currently access, creating a sense of mystery and scale that most games never achieve. But here's where things get truly staggering. The game's approach to distance and scale isn't just about creating impressive vistas or long travel times. It's about creating a sense of journey that makes every expedition feel like a genuine adventure across a vast and dangerous world. When you set out from Limgrave heading toward the mountaintops of the giants, you're not just fast traveling between disconnected zones. You're embarking on what would be equivalent to a cross-continental journey, passing through distinct climate zones, different ecosystems, and radically different civilizations. The gradual changes in architecture, vegetation, enemy types, and environmental conditions aren't just cosmetic variety. They're the result of simulating what would actually happen if you traveled across a continent-sized landmass. The elevation changes alone are staggering. When you climb from the Siofra River to the highest peaks of the mountaintops, you're ascending what would be equivalent to climbing from sea level to the top of Mount Everest. The game disguises this through clever level design and atmospheric effects, but the actual vertical distance you're covering represents a genuine mountain range of epic proportions. This attention to realistic scale extends to the underground areas as well. The cavern systems you explore aren't just random caves thrown together for gameplay purposes. They're geologically accurate representations of what massive underground river systems would actually look like, complete with proper water flow, realistic rock formations, and cave networks that follow natural patterns of erosion and geological development. And here's something that most players never consider. The time it takes to traverse different areas isn't just arbitrary game balancing. It's proportional to the actual distances you're covering within the world's space. That long ride from Limgrave to Caelid, you're covering what would be hundreds of miles in real-world terms. The game compresses this for playability, but the underlying spatial relationships are consistent and realistic. This creates a sense of place that goes far beyond what most open-world games achieve. You're not just moving between gameplay areas, you're traveling across a believable world with realistic geography, consistent climate patterns, and logical spatial relationships between different regions. The implications of this design philosophy are profound. It means that every journey you take, every expedition you embark on, every exploration session you undertake is part of a larger adventure across one of the most convincing fantasy worlds ever created. You're not just playing a game. You're exploring a place that feels real, believable, and genuinely massive. So the next time you boot up Elden Ring and look out across the lands between, remember this. What you're seeing isn't just a big game world. It's a revolutionary approach to world design that creates a sense of scale, depth, and interconnectedness that most games never even attempt to achieve. Every horizon you see stretching into the distance, every underground passage that leads into darkness, every elevator that carries you between worlds, every connection between areas that seems impossible but somehow makes perfect sense. It's all part of a master plan to create not just a game world, but a genuine place that exists in 3 dimensions with layers of depth that most players will never fully explore. The lands between isn't just bigger than you realize. It's bigger than you can possibly imagine. And that's exactly what makes it so extraordinary.